I think it's really important to point out that an internet shutdown is in itself and of itself an infringement of people's rights. It's this year and last year where it's intensified. And that's concerning for the people of Pakistan. I think the most interesting trend to have emerged in 2024 was the shift away from social media shutdowns and towards full internet blackouts. The number of blackouts in 2024 almost doubled, and social media shutdowns were about a third less. TikTok is growing as a target for shutdowns. So increasingly, governments around the world are targeting TikTok in the same way that they're targeting Twitter today. And that's a really interesting development. A government that's serious about being a digital player can't be shutting down the internet at all. A healthy democracy trusts its citizens with access to information and finds other ways to make its point.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Digipod. My name is Faria Aziz. Today I'm joined by Simon Miliano, who is head of research at Top 10 VPN. His report on the network disruptions, the economic impact, has been widely reported in the Pakistani press as well. And we will be talking a little bit more about the stats, the methodology, and the impact that network disruptions and shutdowns are having globally, but also in Pakistan. Thank you, Simon, so much for joining us. If I could just ask you to start out by telling our audience what Top 10 VPN does and your role there.
Hello, thanks so much for inviting me on. Top 10 VPN is an independent VPN review company based out of London in the UK. I'm head of research there. So my role is to commission and conduct research that's related to internet censorship, digital privacy, cybersecurity, things like that, to help educate the public about those issues and hopefully start using VPNs more often.
Now, we obviously read your report, and Pakistan doesn't make it to the top of a lot of lists. And in this case as well, Pakistan has made it to the top of the list for the most amount of, the economic impact because of network shutdowns ahead of Myanmar and Sudan. Could I ask you to just explain how the methodology around, mapping these disruptions and also the costs associated with network disruptions?
So for the past 6 years, I've been monitoring every single internet shutdown around the world, and I feed that information into a publicly available tool published by a civil society organization called NetBlocks, who are very well known in the community. And I feed all of my data into the NetBlocks cost tool, as it's called, and that starts to pump out some of the stats that we use in the report. Now, to make things a little more difficult is when there are internet shutdowns, such as there have been in Pakistan this year, where it's not across the whole country. It might just be in Karachi or Islamabad or a particular location. So part of the research that I did was to identify where the shutdowns had happened and then do it. Quite a simple calculation based upon population and internet users to come up with how much was that shutdown, how much did it affect the economy, even though it wasn't across the whole country. So all of that comes together into this report, which I've been doing for the past 6 years, and I've been able to see some interesting trends in that time about how internet shutdowns happen.
We've seen in network shutdowns oftentimes, and also in Pakistan, the narrative around them is that other countries do it too. And sure enough, your report reflects that various countries do shut down the internet from time to time. And I'm wondering, in terms of the patterns that you've seen over the years, whether some countries tend to do it more than others, and they've stayed in sort of that top 10 category, because you have a component in your report which also reflects why this happens in terms of the humanitarian or the political situation that leads to some of these.
I think it's really important to point out that an internet shutdown is in itself and of itself an infringement of people's rights. We have a right in 2024 to have access to the internet for information and for communication. These things are very important. However, often these shutdowns happen at the same time as other infringements of human rights. And this is often around protests. the infringement of the right to peaceful assembly. It's often around infringements of the right to have free and fair elections. Um, often a shutdown is a way to control and influence an election result as well. And then finally, we also look at whether there's infringements on freedom of the press. But like I said, the shutdown itself is also a human rights violation. Um, I think there's also other reasons for shutdowns. They're not the only reasons. We see a lot of shutdowns around exam cheating as well, not so much in Pakistan, but in other countries as well, and also where there's conflicts. One side or the other in a conflict will target the internet to help achieve their aims, and that's something that we've seen in places like Sudan and Myanmar. Um, in terms of who are the most regular culprits, if you like, in terms of shutting down the internet, there is a handful of countries that I always expect to see in the top 10. And until now, Pakistan was not one of them. We're talking more like India, Russia, Myanmar, Sudan, Iraq, and Iran, places like that. Until recently, Pakistan wasn't really a country I thought about very much when it came to shutdowns. Um, as recently as 2020 and 2021, there were no shutdowns at all. And the years before and after that, only a small amount. I think Pakistan was only just in the top 20 in 2022. It's this year and last year where it's intensified. And that's concerning for the people of Pakistan. To just the rapid increase in internet shutdowns and the readiness with which the Pakistani authorities are turning to this is of great concern.
Absolutely. And accompanied with the shutdowns is also this narrative that we are constantly hearing locally by government representatives that it doesn't have a cost. It is not impacting the economy or the digital sector or others. And is this something that because you map and you quantify that this actually has a very tangible cost across countries? How do you, is there a reaction that you receive from others as well to your reports that quantify this kind of damage when there is this obfuscation and deflection that it really doesn't, cost us anything if there is a network shutdown?
I'll be honest with you, I've never had such a strong pushback as I've had this year from the Pakistani authorities. It's disingenuous, to say the least, that there's no impact from an internet shutdown. Now, of course, it's up for debate how big that impact might be. But I'm pretty confident to say that the estimate in my report is conservative. If I was pushed, I would say that actually it's probably a lot more than that. However, it is very difficult to map accurately. And of course, as economies become increasingly digital over time, then we need to renew how we and revisit how we do these calculations. And to be honest, that probably needs to happen in terms of the NetBlocks tool. However, to turn around and say that it doesn't cost anything, I think is absurd. To be honest with you, an internet shutdown, complete blackout, to say that that doesn't have any economic impact, it beggars belief because you've got small businesses, for example, unable to carry out their business. If they're an online business, you can't operate without an internet. If you're a taxi driver and you're getting your rides via an app and there's no internet, you can't operate. If you're a delivery driver, you can't operate. And that's on a small scale. At the larger scale, the transactions that aren't happening with potentially financial implications. And that's just the internet blackouts. The social media shutdowns, I do understand that sometimes if you don't think about it properly, you might think, okay, well, why does shutting Twitter? Why does blocking Twitter or X, sorry, why does that cause an economic impact? But if you start to think about it, there are people who make their living on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, your social media platform of choice, influencers, if you like. There are people who rely on social media as channels to find customers for their business. There are many businesses that use social media for customer service, and all of that can't happen, or at least is severely disrupted when a social media site is blocked. And then there's also these more longer term impacts. If you're a country that is constantly shutting down the internet, or if you're constantly shutting down people's favorite social media platforms, then investors are going to become less confident in your country because it's not reliable. It's volatile. It's not trustworthy from an investor's point of view. And then there's also tourism. As a tourist, you want to be able to share your photographs on Instagram or on X, or just generally be able to access the things that you would normally access. So regular shutdowns chip away at the confidence that tourists have and in choosing your country as a destination. So even though Twitter and Facebook might seem a bit frivolous, when you drill down into it, there is actually a real and tangible economic impact from shutting those down, especially for as long as Pakistan has done for X in 2024, which is almost the whole year.
Yeah, we will be entering in February. It'll be a whole year since the ban on X, and on top of that, VPN restrictions and registration regime, which further curtails access and making it more difficult for people to access these platforms. I do want to also finally ask you, because you've been doing this for several years and you've been mapping these patterns, and your report also takes a tiered approach towards it's not just about a shutdown, but also the frequency of the shutdown, but platforms, etc. What are you witnessing now on the global scale, and what is it that you particularly witnessed in 2024? Because we've seen whether it was election year in a lot of countries, there has been a lot of conflict, and the internet has been the primary casualty, and information, access to information has been pulled for citizens globally.
I think the most interesting trend to have emerged in 2024 was the shift away from social media shutdowns and towards full internet blackouts. The number of blackouts in 2024 almost doubled, and social media shutdowns were about a third less. Now, my theory is that I think that governments around the world are realizing that their citizens have got access to VPNs and can use them to get around a shutdown, making it less effective. You can't use a VPN to get around an internet blackout. So, from a government's point of view, although it's more damaging, they can achieve their goals more effectively through an internet blackout. And where the trend has shown that in 2024, almost doubling in just a single year, which is very concerning. And then the other smaller trend that is quite interesting is that although Twitter or X is the most blocked platform by a long, long way, about 20,000 hours in 2024. TikTok is growing as a target for shutdowns. Again, that might seem like just a fun, silly app for sharing short videos, but increasingly for younger generations, that is their platform of choice for communicating with each other, for sharing ideas, for organizing a protest, perhaps. So increasingly, governments around the world are targeting TikTok in the same way that they're targeting Twitter today. And that's a really interesting development.
And Simon, finally, as we round this conversation off, what are you foreseeing for 2025? I know it's early on in the year and 2024 has been some year, but are there any projections, or what would you also say in terms of this trend that, like you flagged, that governments are now resorting to complete internet shutdowns, which completely pulls people off the grid? And we've seen this happen in Bangladesh, and I mean, it happens frequently in Pakistan as well, that there's a complete information blackout, which causes a host of other problems. What do you foresee in 2025?
I think in 2025, not only will we see more of these full internet blackouts, which is really problematic, but I think we'll see more localized shutdowns as well. Until this year, that was limited to India, where individual states might target a city or even a village and shut it down for a week or a day. Seeing that happen in Pakistan and effectively too, I think we'll start to see maybe neighboring countries or other countries around the world implementing that strategy. And again, that's really impactful. And when it happens a lot over a whole country, it can really add up. It's death by a thousand cuts.
And just finally, I want to ask you because it is about it, there is economic impact, and a lot of these countries are talking about becoming digital nations and harnessing the digital economy. Are they quite understanding that the impact of their actions directly contradicts these aims?
A government that's serious about being a digital player can't be shutting down the internet at all. A healthy democracy trusts its citizens with access to information and finds other ways to make its point. You can't shut down the internet and be taken seriously as a nation in 2025.
Thank you, Simon, for your time. This is all that we have on the DigiPod today. Thank you for joining us.